Good afternoon and welcome to our July 27th, 2021 board business meeting. We are joined by 5 of our board members and several staff in person for today's meeting. The others are joining us remotely. Our meeting is being live streamed on the website and MCPS TV. We also have provided a telephone number for the public to join the meeting that way as well. Although some of us are in person today, live public comments are still suspended until further notice. We hope to resume live public comments by this August. Before we officially begin the meeting, I would like to take a moment to publicly thank Boy Scout Troop 264 of Brookville, Albany, for helping to beautify the front entrance of this historic building. I noticed the landscaping changes today as I walked in. Troop 264, you did a fabulous job last week in the heat. Now, let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to call the roll to recognize the board members joining us here in person. I'll start with Ms. O'Neill.
Good afternoon, Pat O'Neill.
Ms. Mandrowski,
Good afternoon, Rebecca Smontrowski.
Ms. Silvestri,
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Ms. Evans,
Good afternoon.
Dr. Daka,
Good afternoon.
Ms. Harris,
Good afternoon, everyone.
Ms. Haluni.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, we can now begin the meeting with the approval of the revised agenda.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Dr. McKnight.
Good afternoon, President Wolf, board members. Thank you so much. Today we are here moving forward the Human Resources and Development Report, and we do bring forward a few recommended appointments. Today we have 4 recommended appointments, and I will bring forward the first. We recommend Ms. Natasha D. Bolden as the Executive Director in the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Schools. Ms. Bolden has been employed with MCPS for 15 years as a mathematics teacher, instructional specialist, acting director, assistant principal, principal intern, and most recently as principal at Mill Creek Town Elementary School. Ms. Bolden looks forward to joining the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Schools to support curriculum instruction and the well-being of all students and staff.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous.
Thank you. The next appointment we bring forward is Mrs. Tracy D. Oliver Gary as supervisor for pre-K-12 social studies. Ms. Oliver Gary has been employed with MCPS for 18 years as a substitute teacher, social studies teacher, social studies resource teacher, literacy coach, and most recently as a pre-K-12 social studies content specialist. Mrs. Oliver Gary looks forward to providing students with equitable and inclusive social studies curricula that will prepare them to be conscious and proactive participants in their communities and the larger society.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous.
Thank you. Next, we bring forward to you for recommending Mr. Vincent R. Liebert as principal of Montgomery Village Middle School. Mr. Liebert has been employed with MCPS for 20 years as a paraeducator, special education teacher, assistant school administrator, assistant principal, principal intern, and most recently as assistant principal at Montgomery Village Middle School. Mr. Liebert looks forward to continuing to serve and support the amazing students, staff, and families at Montgomery Village Middle School.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous.
Next, we bring forward Ms. Nicola A. Wallen as principal of Wingate Elementary School. Ms. Wallen has been employed with MCPS for 18 years as a special education teacher, special education resource teacher, classroom teacher, assistant principal, staff development teacher, assistant school principal, and most recently as assistant principal at Galloway Elementary School. Ms. Wallen looks forward to joining Wingate Elementary School to support a high-quality instructional program where all students are learning and thriving.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Wilk. That completes our appointments for this meeting.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is public comments. Although we are conducting this meeting in person, live public comments remain suspended, and we will continue to accept written, video, and audio testimony until further notice. Public comments is one of our opportunities to hear the views and receive the advice of community members. Board members will take your comments into consideration, but it is not our practice to take action at this time on issues that are raised. We encourage public input on policy, program, and practices. This is not the proper avenue to address specific student or employee matters, so we encourage everyone to utilize existing avenues of redress for complaints. Please check our website for information about upcoming board meetings, hearings, and work sessions, including any changes to our meeting start times. We received one written testimony for today. You may view the written testimony in full on board docs where it is posted with the other materials for this meeting. Here is a summary of the written testimony submitted for today's meeting. Nicole Zimmerman. Ms. Zimmerman submitted testimony on behalf of the Montgomery County Democratic Socialists of America regarding the charter school applications that are before the board today. This organization opposes the privatization of public services, expresses a concern that charter schools exacerbate segregation, and specifically opposes the business-focused charter school applications for the reasons outlined in more detail in Ms. Zimmerman's written testimony. We received one audio testimony from Preem Shaw. Please play the audio.
Good afternoon, Ms. Wolf and members of the Montgomery County Board of Education. My name is Preem Shaw, and I'm a rising 7th grader at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School. Montgomery County is one of the most diverse counties in the country and has an extremely diverse school system. Students from all backgrounds, of all religions, races, and from different schools. Yet, there are significant disparities of whose voices are heard and who is represented at the board. This results in vast inequalities throughout the school system. Students that live far away from Carver Educational Services Center, ESOL students, students on forums, and schools that are deeply affected by the lack of information and opportunities are not always represented. Students and parents in less affluent areas have had much less input in surveys such as the Boundary Analysis Feedback Form and other surveys. Virtual learning has further exposed the disparities in information, resources, and opportunities. I encourage the Board of Education and MCPS to increase input from historically underrepresented communities through allowing the option for pre-recorded testimony for students who live far away from Carver or have other commitments. Allowing students to testify in their preferred language and increasing the number of students and work groups that aren't already involved in countywide student government and are affected by the decisions of the work group. In addition, targeting low-income and communities of color for surveys such as the Boundary Analysis Feedback Form so that their interests are also represented, as well as increasing funding to offset PTA funds for more affluent schools. Let's make MCPS a more equitable school system. Thank you for your time.
We also received 10 video testimonies. First up is Erika Norman.
My name is Erika Norman, and I'm a mother of 2 MCPS students. I am testifying today to make 4 points. The first point is that my son, who was in private school last year for first grade, has decided on his own that he would like to return to MCPS for second grade. The second point I wanted to make is that I was pleased to see in the Back Better Than Ever plan and video that there will be an effort to restore as much normalcy as possible to the schools this fall. And I hope that MCPS will follow through on its commitment to restore in-person specials as well as more normal recess and PE. Third point, I was concerned by the asterisk that was placed next to MCPS's commitment to open 5 days a week by school board member Lynn Harris. Fourth, I would ask the board to please stop using buzzwords such as in-person educational experience or in-person instructional experience, as if going to school and learning in a classroom with a teacher is something special or extra. That mindset will lead to more bad decisions, and I worry that it shows a lack of commitment to keep schools open 5 days a week this year. Thank you.
Next is Melanie Taplinsky.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Taplinsky. My husband and I have 2 daughters in MCPS schools, and we appreciate your commitment to safely returning our children to in-person learning. I'm here to urge the board to continue to require masks in school this fall. We've all heard the latest COVID numbers, so I won't dwell on them, but make no mistake, Delta has changed the game. Delta is extremely infectious, twice as contagious as the original virus. Delta cases in Montgomery County are more than doubling every 2 weeks. Delta is resistant to vaccines, meaning even vaccinated children and adults can get and spread Delta, including to unvaccinated siblings. Vaccines may prevent Delta infection less than 40% of the time, well below the 50% required for vaccine approval. Delta is infectious even before symptoms show. Delta, even when initially asymptomatic, can lead to long COVID, which can involve serious neurocardio and cognitive symptoms. And Delta hits young people harder. 1/4 of new cases are in children. With Delta cases skyrocketing, the American Academy of Pediatrics last week recommended universal masking in school buildings for those over age 2. DC public schools and PG County schools will require masks in the fall in school. With Montgomery County cases more than doubling every 2 weeks, MCPS must do the same. Don't underestimate this virus. As a country, we failed to mask soon enough last year because we didn't understand the original virus. This time around, we have the chance to get it right. Hockey great Wayne Gretzky once said, "Skate to where the puck is going." We urge the board to follow this advice. Experts predict Delta may reach pandemic record levels by mid-October, yet schools will operate at 100% capacity, 5 days a week. The board has the power now, simply by requiring masks in schools, to prevent infection, reduce COVID spread, and reduce the risk of school shutdowns and quarantines. The board must require universal masking in school now to keep our students safe and our schools open. The board can always revisit the mask issue as warranted based on new data. Thank you for all you do for MCPS families and for the opportunity to advise you today.
Next is Cara Boyle.
Good afternoon. My name is Cara Boyle, and I have a son who is an incoming kindergartner this year. And I am requesting that masking for children be optional regardless of vaccination status. 18 months of real-world data applied to a vast majority of scientific studies have established the risk of even moderate harm to children from the coronavirus is very low. Data shows hospitalization rates for children are about 1%, which is comparable to that of the seasonal flu. Forcing children to wear masks in a vain attempt to protect them from a statistically non-existent threat will be damaging in many ways, both short-term and long-term. Masking encumbers socialization, communication, and speech development by blocking the visualization of mouth movements, obscuring facial expressions, and muffling voices. Understanding emotions and expressions is crucial for learning social interaction and empathy. Since the ability to infer emotions from eye movements and speech alone does not stabilize until adolescence, forced masking of children will cripple their ability to develop properly in these crucial bedrocks of socialization. Masking also heightens anxiety of children with autism and other sensory processing challenges, as well as posing a challenge for children who speak English as their second language. Forced masking merely adds another unnecessary obstacle to an already difficult situation. As a kindergartner attending school for the very first time, my son, along with all of his first-time classmates, will be in a completely new environment, surrounded by people with whom they are unfamiliar. These children are bound to feel nervous, scared, sad, and everything in between. If masking is mandated, they will not even be able to see a reassuring smile, grin, or silly face from their classmates or teachers. And with no real-world data to show clear health benefit to children, wearing a mask must be a choice, not a requirement. And if this board ignores scientific reality and makes the regrettable decision to require masks, then we as parents are demanding that you outline the detailed and specific metrics that will be put in place to facilitate the unmasking of our children. Thank you for your time.
Next is Karen Lust.
Hi, my name is Karen Lust. I'm a product of MCPS schools, and I have 2 elementary school age children now here. Like many other parents, I would like my children to return to school this fall in person, but I want it to be safe for them, and I know we all do. Despite the severity of the variants happening, the CDC isn't currently fully tracking the incidence of breakthrough infections. However, studies coming out of Singapore this week, where over 70% of the eligible population has been vaccinated with either Pfizer or Moderna, they're seeing vaccinated adults accounting for over 75% of current COVID cases. These variants are more transmissible and more severe than what we've experienced previously. And we know that the brunt of severe infections are falling on unvaccinated populations, like our children, who have been accounting for up to 20% of weekly new COVID cases right here in the US. So this fall, we have to do what's necessary to protect them, and our teachers, our staff, and our broader community at large, right? Otherwise, we're going to see outbreaks where children could get COVID from each other or vaccinated teachers and staff. So we need to have a common sense approach with regard to what we know works, right? Complete and correct masking, social distancing as much as possible, good ventilation, close contact tracing, and symptom monitoring, and more testing to limit community spread. The American Academy of Pediatrics has now urged full masking for school this fall, and we absolutely need to follow that mandate. There's funding through the Maryland Department of Health to provide testing programs for students and staff so that MCPS doesn't have to foot the bill. And I know Baltimore public schools have applied, and if MCPS hasn't, why not? This money is coming straight from the CDC to keep us safe, to mitigate risk. And there are reasonable measures that we can take to that have been proven scientifically to limit transmission. We need to do that this fall. Thank you all so much for your time and for your hard work for the community.
Next is Jessica Farago.
I'm Jessica Farago, an MCPS graduate and mom to an emerging kindergartner, Grace. In-person summer school was a case study that failed miserably, and unless big changes are made, will worsen come fall. On the second day of summer school, a vaccinated staff member came to work sick with COVID. 6 days later, I was notified she wasn't in danger. She wasn't considered a close contact. Grace seemed fine that Wednesday evening, but that night she became rapidly very ill. She whimpered in her sleep from pain. Her fever skyrocketed. She couldn't keep anything down. If it wasn't for my nursing degree, she would have been hospitalized. I got her temperature down manually and took her to the doctor, where they in fact confirmed she did have COVID. Later, I found out 3 other kids were out sick that week before mine. MCPS's response was abysmal. Kids in her class weren't required or even encouraged to get tested, even though it's free. They were nicely asked to stay home and quarantine, during which one went to Universal Studios, admitted to the teacher she had COVID symptoms on Zoom, and she's returning in person on Monday. There was a probable Delta outbreak, and the response was to hide from it. If there's no data, then it didn't happen, right? Except it is happening. Not just out there, here in our county, cases are up 198% in 2 weeks. Community transmission is up more than 25% and 73% of all MoCo zip codes. We need to be proactive, not reactive. That means mandatory masks for all, mandatory vaccines for staff, randomized pool testing, negative tests for any student who returns from illness, cohorting and social distancing, and most importantly, transparency. I was more transparent and proactive than MCPS, and it was my kid who was sick. My kid didn't die. She did get to spend 10 days isolated away from everyone, including her family, scared and sick and alone, only allowed to leave her bedroom to go to the bathroom. You owe her every precaution and you have the resources to do it, so do it.
Next is Jhumka Gupta.
I'm Jhumka Gupta. I'm a public health scientist and health equity scholar, and also parent of a rising second grader who'll be going back to school after being remote all last year due to her underlying medical issues. We need a safe environment for her, and I will reiterate why universal masking is needed. Number one, universal masking is well aligned with the new guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics. They recommend all persons in schools ages 2 and above wear masks, regardless of vaccination status. This reduces stigma among those who will need to wear masks because of medical issues like my child. And also, it takes away burden of trying to decipher who's masked and who's not, so you can actually focus on school. Number two, kids under 12 are not eligible for the vaccine yet. This makes them vulnerable to the highly transmissible Delta variant. Number three, kids can get COVID, they can get severely sick from it, and they can transmit. Number four, it's a matter of health equity. This pandemic has disproportionately impacted Black and Brown communities. Kids who have gotten severely ill or died have also been disproportionately Black or Brown and or have had underlying medical issues. Our county has declared racism as a public health emergency. We have done really well with vaccine uptake, but we should not let go of masking as part of our toolbox, simply because some view going unmasked as a reward for their vaccination status. Our reward should be that everyone in our county have the greatest opportunity to have health and avoid COVID.
Next is Milit Jirukovic.
My name is Milit Jirukovic, and my wife and I have a child who is supposed to enter Montgomery County Schools this fall. I had asked for the curriculum months ago, and I still have not received it. And the only thing that I can be left with now is thinking that the school board does not want me to see the curriculum. And what I feel is that you're hiding the curriculum that you're actually ashamed of. Another point, even though children are at an extremely low risk of COVID hospitalization, masks are being required. They're actually muzzles, not masks. The board is implementing unhealthy, inappropriate social and political themes in schools. The board is doing this because they're politically beholden to their political party. The current unhealthy politics is the board's agenda. The normal, healthy development of children must be the only agenda. The board and some principals in Montgomery County have chosen an unhealthy agenda over the children in their schools. Because of these facts, I do not trust you with my child. One may hope that teachers are the last line of defense, but that may be only wishful thinking. Again, your agenda is unhealthy and wrong, and you're losing the trust in the community. I cannot risk sending my child to your schools.
Next is Cara McNulty.
Hi, my name is Kara McNulty, and I'm the parent of 2 MCPS students. I have testified by video several times now, and I am perplexed that you have not yet opened your meetings to the public and limit testimony to 2 minutes. It's very disheartening that you have no genuine interest in hearing the concerns of parents, and it's unfortunate that you do not respect open meetings laws. I very much look forward to testifying in person. As you prepare for the full fall reopening that you have promised to the 160,000 students and their families, Please stay focused on rectifying the academic failures from last year. You only taught half the curriculum, and very clear plans need to be put in place to recover from this. As a school board, I hope you are requesting very detailed analysis of the recent MAP scores so you can understand the negative impacts of your bad decisions and use this to understand what the areas of emphasis should be in your recovery plan. Please stop with acronyms and infographics and put actionable plans in place to rectify the failures from last year. Do not get distracted by building contingency plans for future unknown emergencies. Your malfeasance has created an immediate emergency that requires your complete attention right now. We are all aware that positive cases for the coronavirus are increasing. We also know that Montgomery County is one of the most vaccinated counties in the country. Because of the high rate of vaccination, the metric you should be tracking right now is hospitalizations, not positive cases. Do you yourselves know how many people in Montgomery County are currently hospitalized with COVID? Our county is home to 1.1 million people, and based on the most recent data released by the county, 14 people are currently in the hospital with COVID. 14! Do not derail all the potential for forward progress this year because of 14 hospitalizations. This disease is becoming endemic like the flu and other contagious diseases that we live with on a day-to-day basis, and we need to return to our normal lives.
Next is Calissa Phillips.
Hello, I'm Dr. Calissa Phillips, here to speak to you as an MCPS parent, homeowner, and working mother. A quality public education is our family's top priority. I applaud the board's commitment to fully reopen for 5 days of in-person learning with a virtual academy for students who need it. However, I find the Prosper Plan insufficient to turn around profound learning losses and to meet the needs of students who are eager to be challenged academically. MCPS is run by a bureaucratic central office that affords little flexibility. Curricula are selected district-wide, classes taught on Promethean boards and Chromebooks, and virus mitigation plans have been uniform. Even school principals have been told they can't run air conditioning outside certain hours, as it is controlled centrally. What's the best way forward, considering the diverse needs of administrators, teachers, parents, and students in MCPS? To address these problems, I urge the board to afford greater autonomy to school principals. Principals are hired to run schools and are best suited to address the unique needs of their students and family circumstances. They should be given the freedom to innovate by selecting curricula such as traditional in-person instruction without screens, outdoor classrooms and life labs, learning through arts and music, more movement breaks, or daily PE. Principals should be allowed to customize virus mitigation strategies to meet the needs of their immediate community. Parents should also be given the option to enroll their child in any school that would best suit their child's needs. After more than a year of learning disruption, my children are eager to get back to a regular school year. Thank you for your time and attention.
Our final video comes from Brad Shear.
My name is Brad Shear, and I'm a parent of 2 MCPS students. Since March 13, 2020, this board has put partisan politics ahead of student needs, refused to listen to the science and common sense, and committed educational malpractice by refusing to do what's in the best interest of our students. For example, this past academic year, you ignored the mental health needs of students with a failed virtual
Do any of our board members on Zoom have any comments on what we've heard so far? I'm not seeing any hands here either. Ms. O'Looney, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Preem from MLK Middle School for his testimony today. It's so nice to hear from students, and I really appreciated his concerns and also vision for a more inclusive and accessible Board of Education. I know even once we move to fully in-person testimony, we'll also provide students and all people the opportunity to continue to send in videos and audios online. So really appreciate his testimony and his insight in how we can really reach the disparate members of our community.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything? All right, go ahead.
My name is Brad Sharron. I'm a parent of 2 MCPS students. Since March 13, 2020, this board has put partisan politics ahead of student needs, refused to listen to the science and common sense, and committed educational malpractice by refusing to do what's in the best interest of our students. For example, this past academic year, you ignored the mental health needs of students with a failed virtual school experiment. When I asked this board to implement a grading policy for equity purposes to account for the absolute failures and shortcomings in virtual learning and your error-prone grading software, my pleas were ignored. During the pandemic, students, including mine, have not received all their school messages in their Gmail accounts because MCPS's systems are not synced, and students have not been told that messages may be sent to at least 3 different apps. Then summer school was a major tech failure because many students, including mine, were not sent their class information until after classes had already started, which puts them at a disadvantage. This board's lack of transparency and accountability is harming our children. After many parents voiced their concerns on January 28th, on February 9th, this board implemented unethical and unconstitutional public speaking rules to silence parents who work to shine a light on malfeasance and utter corruption. When I requested information about your un-American speaking rule change, I was sent redacted and illegible documents. What is this board and MCPS hiding? All board members who have been on the job since March 13, 2020 need to resign immediately. Dr. McKnight, your predecessor on this board failed our kids. I want you to succeed because that means our kids will succeed. However, for equity's sake, every student must be afforded the opportunity to learn in their local schools with in-person teachers for an entire traditional school day and year, come hell, high water, or Delta variant. Also, you need to ensure that those with IEPs and 504s are provided makeup services for last year's debacle. Please get MCPS's house in order so our kids can once again focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic.
The next business meeting of the Board of Education for public comment is Tuesday, August the 24th. Sign-ups for public comment will open on the evening of Tuesday, August 17th. We're now up to item 5. I'm going to ask Dr. McKnight to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. So good afternoon again, board members. Today, we are going to share a presentation giving you a preview of our fall reopening, Back Better Than Ever, opening schools for this year. We already have a few of our innovative calendar schools that have already opened up, so we are going to highlight for you today some of the experiences that we've had so far in their opening. I must say, and just even listening to public comment today, I've been reflecting on a few things that I've heard. And I just want to say, you know, last board meeting, I talked about Prosper, and the O in Prosper is about reopening schools. And for our students, that's the best thing that we can provide for them right now, given the past year and a half. And a technical part that we continue to mention is that we will have school open every day with a teacher in the classroom. But the purpose of that is not to make it a technical piece, but to highlight the type of education structure that is necessary for students to learn. And we all have had a number of experience in working with our students and hearing from our families that when we were forced into a virtual environment, that structure just did not work as the best learning condition for all of our students. And so I just want to elevate that because that is the premier part of opening this year, that we're going to be able to provide that to all of our students as we prepare for this fall. Today, we're going to talk about not just our innovative calendar schools, but we're also going to hear and have some discussion around ways that we're going to safely bring our students and staff back into buildings. So, of course, there have been many conversations and national news coming forward every day regarding mask and mask wearing and what that will look like in MCPS. So that will be a big part of our discussion later in this presentation. I'm happy to say that Dr. Gales will be able to join us, our public health officer, to be a part of that discussion and be able to answer any questions. So the goal of opening schools 5 days a week in our district really does highlight, as I said, our two innovative calendar schools, Arcola and Roscoe Nix Elementary. And they literally open their doors for students as the first day of school, signaling that on July 12th. These schools particularly have 210 school days built into their calendar, which is what separates them or is different about them from our traditional schools. They have 30 additional days of instruction, and the 30 days of instruction becomes really important for our students, particularly as we think about ways that we can accelerate learning for them, provide more enrichment opportunities, really be able to provide intervention for students who need those interventions. And of course, providing ways to bring the learning to more relevant context, whether that may be field trips or a number of other things. And so we're excited about those two schools because they are able to provide that opportunity for their students. And I must say, Ms. Harris and Ms. O'Looney and I had the opportunity to visit these schools, and it was so rewarding to just go into the classrooms and see the staff and students interacting. There was one student in the classroom, the teacher had asked them to draw something that represented what made them happy. And I'll never forget that moment because one student, he drew a school and he said, "I'm happy to be in school. This is what makes me happy." And, that was, of course, a communication coming through from I believe it was a second grader, but it just signified for us how important this year is and how in many cases our students have developed a deep appreciation for the structure of just being back in school and are so looking forward to that. The teachers were also equally excited in the room with their students. We saw them there just really doing everything to think about ways that they could renew the relationships with their students and have them comfortable getting back into some routines. And most importantly, giving them time to build relationship with one another, their peers, who many of them may not have had an opportunity to do that before. Some of the students we could see, they were seeing their friends for the first time. And we're just very excited to see peers who they were used to playing on the playground with before, but just being back into the classroom setting. And most importantly for us, it really did signify the steps of us being able to say we have our students back in the learning environment that we know works best for them, which then allows us to really be able to say, how can we immediately get to our students and their learning, and that being the priority. And most importantly, starting the process of saying, once we get their learning going, then we're able to really have a better understanding of how have their learning been impacted by COVID-19? And most importantly, providing instructional support for our staff who will be making first instruction a priority. It was already a priority, but even more important as we think about all the needs of instruction following COVID-19. So those will be the pieces that we cover today. And I'd like for us just to pause for a moment because I shared what our experience was at Arcola and Nix, but we do have footage and took some video of our students and staff in those buildings. And so I'd like for you to be able to see that experience for yourselves. So at this time, I'll ask us to move forward to the video.
Good morning. How are you? How you doing? Good.
We're coming back to in-person instruction for 5 days a week
at 100% capacity.
And it will be better than ever.
The first day of school is August 30th, and schools will return to their pre-COVID schedules, including bell times, bus schedules, number and length of class periods per day, lunch, recess, and extracurricular activities. The safe return to school is already underway and working at our 2 year-round schools, Arcola and Roscoe Nix Elementaries.
It is going great. Our students are excited. Our staff are excited to see all of the students in person. Everyone is ready to be back in school.
Over 50,000 students in MCPS summer programs have followed the new procedures as well. It's helped students and staff to prepare for what's to come this fall.
So to teach virtually, our teachers had to expand their thinking and creativity. And now that we're coming back to in-person, we're going to bring that all back to the building, and our teaching is going to be stronger than ever.
All of our teachers have upgraded technology. Our students will continue to have one-to-one technology with Chromebooks that they can use here and at home. Our staff members are going to take time to really look and examine to find out where our students are performing academically. And for those students who are experiencing learning gaps, we have several interventions ready to put in place for all of our students.
MCPS is providing more social and emotional learning so our students feel safe and are ready to learn.
This is a big effort, but it is vital to help our students prosper, and we know that our instruction is going to be better than ever.
As we fully reopen, the health and safety of our students and staff is paramount. While not mandatory at this time, MCPS strongly encourages all staff, parents, and students over the age of 12 to get vaccinated. Currently and subject to change, MCPS will require all students, staff, and visitors to wear appropriate face coverings when in school buildings.
The practice of wearing face coverings in schools and in other populated places is key in helping us reduce the spread of COVID, as well as just keeping everyone safe.
If students or staff are ill or have COVID-like symptoms, they should stay at home, consult with their doctor, and consider getting a COVID-19 test. If someone develops COVID-19 symptoms while at school, school staff will provide the steps needed. Contact tracing will continue in the case of known positive cases.
Students and staff are used to wearing masks, but the main thing is we're in person and they're engaging with peers and staff.
And with relaxed physical distancing guidelines, we can now arrange our classrooms in a variety of ways to accommodate all students in person. We've removed physical distancing tape marks and signage. Cubbies, lockers, hallways, and restrooms can be used as they were prior to the pandemic. Students who typically take an MCPS bus to school will do so again, but with mask protocols in place. For those students who walk or who are dropped off, they need to remember to mask up before entering the building.
Having students back in person has really just been re-energizing for all of us, starting with our teachers, just having faces in front of them. It really just has brought them back to planning for what's most important, and that's our students and their success. We're absolutely thrilled to be back because now we're able to implement those hands-on experiences that the students missed. Starting first with our elective courses, our art, music, PE classes, as well as our career and technology education courses here, but also our clubs and extracurricular activities, as well as our interscholastic sports.
Together, the 2021-22 school year will be better than ever.
You guys are awesome!
MCPS better than ever!
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. So there we shared just a few examples of the planning and what's taking place in our schools in preparation for the fall. Before we get into discussions about how do we create a safe environment for our students, I'll pause and see if the board has any questions or comments. Okay, very good. So we will then move into the next part of our presentation. And before we get into that, I just wanted to share a few things that, that we will have a more discrete discussion on in just a moment regarding masks. And it has been very important for us to consider throughout this entire process, who are our students who have not yet been had a vaccine available to them. And so those are students under the age of 12. And to put into some context, I just want to share with the board, that represents between 45 to 52% of our students, okay? A significant number of students. And so as we think about prioritizing bringing them back into school for in-person instruction in the fall and to be able to prosper and learn academically and thrive in those environments, we do have to take into serious consideration what that means. I'm sure you know as well as I do, information is coming forward every day, every week. Just this morning, there was information coming out saying that the CDC may be coming out with guidance over the next few days saying that vaccinated and unvaccinated students and staff in schools should wear masks. I believe it was a week ago, we heard from the American Academy of Pediatrics that did recommend that we students do wear a mask in schools in the fall. And so we've taken this research and taken into consideration in terms of planning for the fall. So you will see our recommendations based and grounded in the foundation of a lot of that research. And again, Dr. Gales will be joining us today so that he is able to provide some of the county perspective and where we are as a county into this discussion. So at this time, I will ask you to bring up the slide presentation, and we can move to slide number 4 around fall face covering expectations, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Dawson.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, ultimately, we want to do whatever it takes to ensure the safety of our students. And based on the nation and the country, and what we're experiencing currently under the COVID-19 cases and the vaccinations that are still not available for any of our students that are 12 years and younger, in light of that context and based on and in being in alignment with the Academy, American Academy of Pediatric recommendations, we recommend that all students, staff, and visitors across all levels, elementary, middle, and high, will be required to wear face coverings in school buildings, regardless of vaccination status. Now, this represents a continuation of our current practice, featured just recently in the video you watched on Roscoe Nix and Arcola. The face coverings are not required outdoors, but we strongly recommend for unvaccinated individuals to have a face covering. We will continue with our on-school buses face coverings for all students, and will be required to wear face coverings each day. Next slide, please. Part of the research that Dr. McKnight has talked about is also looking at what is going on currently, and a significant portion of our student population is not eligible for the vaccination. That is critically important for us, and masks and face coverings protect unvaccinated students from COVID-19 and reduce variability and transmission. The potential difficulty in monitoring or enforcing mask policies was considered, and especially for those that are not vaccinated. In the absence of schools being able to conduct this monitoring, universal masking is the best and most effective strategy to create consistent messages, expectations, enforcement, and compliance without the added burden of needing to monitor vaccination status. We have continued concerns for variants that are most easily spread among children and adolescents and adults, and we believe that face coverings are the mitigating influence to non-transmission by reducing the risk of transmission. At this point, Mrs. Wolf, we are prepared to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. I'm going to start with our board members on Zoom to see if you have any questions. Dr. Daka? No questions. Ms. O'Looney? Ms. Harris?
Just one. Thank you very much for this. This maybe backtracks a little bit to the public comment, but there was information or an allegation that we have experienced some in-school transmission of COVID during summer school, and wondering how our contact tracing is going and what we're going to do with any information we learn about what we could be doing better to in schools, or if we can identify a way that we could be keeping our students and staff safer with this new, more transmissible variant that we haven't already been implementing.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Harris. And it's very interesting. I'm so glad you did bring that up. And we do share this information, but as of last Friday throughout our summer school program, we did have cases that came up that ranged at around 13. And so our process has been consistent in the contact tracing. It reflects one in which when there's notification that there may be transmission, our school leaders are then contacting Ms. Heather Taplinsky, who is then available to help work with that school to identify the contact tracing that needs to be done so that we can properly identify any students or staff members who need to quarantine as a result of that contact tracing. And we have diligently followed the guidance from our Department of Health, because we've had to work with them throughout this process from the beginning of COVID-19 to be able to follow that and follow those steps in coordination with their guidance in terms of exactly how we do that. In terms of ways that we can improve, we're always looking at ways that we can improve that. A big part of what we depend on is looking at ways to continue to communicate with our families when there is a suspicion of any type of contact, to notify us so that we are then able to react immediately and address any needs that come up. And of course, I just emphasize that because that speaks to how this has to be a full community commitment to making sure that we all contribute to keep our environment safe. And a big part of that is communication. And if, again, there have been any contact that may be under consideration or symptoms, notification is always the first rule of thumb.
Thank you. And I think all of us realize that, you bring a lot of people together during a pandemic, and it will not be unusual that some people will test positive for the virus. But the real concern, and I think we have not seen much in the way of in-school transmission. And so I think to me is the thing that we want to be hyper vigilant about, because we know we'll see cases of people that come into our schools. What we want to make sure doesn't happen is that people that come into the schools with the virus share that with others.
Actually, Ms. Harris, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I'll give you another statistic. We had around 26,000 students who came into our schools for in-person instruction in summer school. And so that statistic of 13, when you really think about it, it does speak to where we are as a county and how thoughtful we are in the process to make sure we do address cases and situations as soon as they come up. So I thank you for raising that, because it is something that we should be aware of and be proud of, but should stay vigilant as we plan and implement those practices through the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
Sure. So definitely appreciated seeing the video of the first day of school and being able to see the happiness on our students' faces and staff faces. Appreciate being able to share with the public what we are going to expect of our students and our staff around masks. And I think you mentioned Dr. Gales will be coming. Yeah. Or no?
Actually, he is here.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very good. So no questions from me. Hi, Dr. Gales. Good to see you. Thanks for your leadership during all of this. Yeah, so I'll pass it on to my other colleagues who might have questions.
Ms. Silvestri, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I wanted to ask why the COVID test is recommended if there is a case in a school or in a class, just to understand the rationale why that wouldn't be required.
I can address that, Ms. Vestri. So one of the things that we're considering is how can we expedite use contact tracing to be able to identify who may have the virus, so we can answer the question, who has it and who doesn't, in a reasonable time, so that they're not quarantining if unnecessary. So of course, the testing component does continue to be important, especially as we move forward, because if there's someone who believes that they have been exposed to the virus, we want that to be able to be confirmed. And so the only way to confirm it, if there has been suspected exposure, is through testing.
So if I am identified as a student that needs to quarantine, I heard someone say that the test was recommended. So it's not required.
Correct. We are recommending testing, and although we're still working through some things, we're actually working with the county government trying to figure out how can we create a testing process that will be one that will be at ease for families, so that it doesn't cause disruption to them being unable to access it, and or things that could result into them being financially responsible in ways that would be a discouragement to them getting tested. So that is a piece that we are absolutely working on, knowing that it will be critical for us to be able to support our families if we want them to be able to have access to testing.
You expect that to be ready by the start of the school year?
We are working. Yes, that would be ideal, and we're working on that. Dr. Gales is shaking his head because we're working in tandem on having that component in place for the start of the year.
So if a student has to quarantine, how will they receive their instruction when they are home, and how long is the quarantine for?
So right now, quarantine, Dr. Gales, and I'll ask for your help. It is 14, still 2 weeks, 14 days, or 10 days?
10 days.
10 days.
It depends. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all. It depends on the situation. So if an individual is symptomatic, the CDC recommendations still recommend 14 days. If an individual is asymptomatic and they receive a negative COVID test, at least at earliest 5 days after their potential exposure, and it's negative, they would be cleared from quarantine at the conclusion of 7 days. If an individual is asymptomatic but does not get tested, then the recommended window is a 10-day quarantine period.
Dr. McNulty, do you want to address the instruction piece?
Yes. So this is why the testing component actually is really important, because if we can have a student that's tested, we'll need to know whether whether the quarantine time is really one that is important or not. If they're out of school for a few days, of course, we can have them be able to work independently. But if they're out for a longer period of time, one of the areas that we are exploring is we do have our virtual academy, but also thinking about how we may be able to provide instruction in other ways. As of right now, it is still, we would follow the policy of what students would do if they're out sick, meaning they still have access to the work. They're not required to come onto a virtual format. But of course, if they're out for an extended amount of time, we'll look at other ways to be able to address that. Sure.
I just have, before I get to you, Rebecca, just one comment. Did you say 26,000 students attended summer school and there were only 13?
Yes, 26, yes, for in-person instruction and 13 cases as of last Friday.
That's excellent. I think that's actually due to the mask wearing. And I just have one question. Did we stop pool testing when school closed so that it wasn't done during the summer?
So we did stop the random testing at the end of the school year, so that was not required during summer school.
Thank you. Ms. Mandrowski.
Yep, thank you for the presentation. I too appreciate seeing those videos and always love seeing the kids. And I'm so grateful to the staff and everything that everybody in our buildings, our administrators and our teachers and support staff who've been working throughout the summer to help with making up learning recovery and things like that. I know that this is hard for many of our students and staff and families, but of course, safety comes first. And when I say this is hard, I mean, particularly, especially with the masking, but safety does come first. So I appreciate very much that we want to follow the recommendations and the guidelines, but kind of a similar along the lines of what Ms. Vestri was asking about, being flexible for those who want to do virtual. We received a list in our transmittal, I think it was, about how the number of applications for the virtual academy, how many have been approved, how many are still being looked at. I'm not sure if this is so much of a question as more of a statement, but I do hope that we can make adjustments so that if someone says, okay, right now, because of having to wear the mask, it's too hard for me, it's too difficult, I'm going to learn from home until some of these restrictions are loosened. Can they participate in the virtual academy, even if they don't intend to do it for the full semester / full year, or whatever it might be, as we're trying to be flexible with what requirements are out there for the best interest of safety?
Right. So we do have a particular process for registration for the academy. And as you know, a big part of what we had to do was be able to staff for the number of students who are in the academy. And so that's why the application process does become really important. We do not have it arranged in terms of it being something that's a fluid process where students are able to come in and out, because we actually want to be able to have accountability in the space, especially in this coming years. We think about how students are progressing and what are the significant factors that are in place that may be helping or hurting their academic success. So we do just simply ask that if our families are experiencing difficult and they find that some things are not working, to start with having that conversation at the school so that we can figure out what is best needed for that particular child in the circumstance. Because it may be something else that can be solved, that, and, you know, it may not be that it's virtual academy that is the answer. And so, you know, as we come back into this whole process, I emphasize, and I can't emphasize it enough, that it's going to be really important for our families to be connected with our schools. And that's why we're really talking about the engagement with the families on an ongoing basis, even for our students who are in virtual academy, to ensure that while they, you know, applied for the virtual academy, that it is in fact the environment that is working in their favor for their academic and social emotional progress. So.
Well, and I appreciate that very much. I agree. I hope that all of our families will take the extra steps to make sure that they're connecting with the schools. But I do hope that we will look at the possibilities that might be available as we, you know, this is still uncharted territory. It's still unprecedented times. And perhaps even if we did something where we said you have to make a commitment, but it's only quarterly as opposed to a full year or even a semester, I do think that it would be helpful for those families that feel that this, you know, whether it's an issue of asthma or just overall discomfort and distraction for learning, that we can be flexible. I also had a little bit of a question about how if someone was sent home or quarantined, particularly our special education students, how they would be provided services during that time, particularly if it's any sort of extended amount of time.
So we had that situation that we had to navigate during COVID-19. And so we will set up with families what it is that we need to do to ensure that students are able to receive services that they need. So that there was, I'll say an example of something that we learned during COVID-19 that would allow us to think about how we can make some services more accessible to our students and families. So many of those circumstances will stay in place.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm hopeful that we can work together through special populations and whatever to even have some of the discussions as to how to better support our students at home, whether it be through how they're taking their test, which at the virtual academy versus in person and things like that. So thank you for your work on that.
Yes, Ms. Wondrowski, I would say I think that would be a great part to come back and discuss in the Special Populations Committee, just because it'll be great to be able to compare how some of those services were provided over this past year and where our students are as they come back into schools and get services, to really think about what are some resources that we still want to continue to have available that really does speak to services and how we provide them to our students receiving special education services. So thank you for that. I think that would be a great next step.
So as a follow-up, if our staff could include that on the agenda process for special populations, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
And can I respond to one of your previous questions about the virtual academy? Just to clarify, the way that it's set up now, students in grades K through 8 can transfer. There's transfer windows at the end of each marking period. And then students in high school, the transfer windows are at the end of each semester.
Great, thanks for that update.
Definitely.
Ms. O'Neill.
Yes, I know that our community is eagerly awaiting full return 5 days a week, as normal as possible. And I realize masks are not 100% normal the way we operated before, but health and safety has to be a priority. And, you know, back in May, none of us really knew anything about the Delta variant. And, you know, things are evolving. Our elementary children most definitely have not been vaccinated. I think about my own family with a daughter who's a September birthday, who would have entered middle school at age 10, and even in 6th grade, and then entering in 7th grade, she wouldn't have been vaccinated because she wouldn't have been 12 at the start of 7th grade. And I have a granddaughter who falls in that same boat. I know masks have become politicized, and many people, it's a symbol, you know, they want freedom and they're not comfortable. I mean, all of us are muffled, we're hot. On occasion, it's more difficult breathing, but when I look at my 8 and 10-year-old grandchildren, they're more resilient and more adaptable than we are as adults.
It is true. When in the spring, when I was in a school community-based program, many of our highly impacted special needs students, it is a problem. And I also know that Montgomery County citizens have stepped up to a high degree to be vaccinated, but as a county, we're still not at 100% vaccination levels for adults or for our over 12 population. I greatly appreciate, Dr. McKnight, your staff's recommendation to adhere to the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. And yes, as I was driving up here today, the CDC is making changes even as we're meeting about guidance for even vaccinated adults in areas where there's high rates of transmission and low rates of vaccinations. I know many in our community will hear the results of this meeting, and I know this is your recommendation, but I really do believe, while it's not scheduled for action, I believe that the board most definitely should endorse this proposal for the fall, because I think it should be clear to everyone that we do support this and there's no misunderstanding coming out of this meeting today. So I move that the board endorse and support the superintendent's recommendation for fall masking requirements as recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics for everyone in school buildings and on school buses to wear masks.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? That's
Dr. McKnight, this doesn't mean necessarily that we'll have masks the entire year, right? We will evaluate this on ever-changing process, and as things improve and our health agencies and experts give us advice, then we can change this mandate. But for now, I think I agree. This is the prudent thing to do at this time.
And certainly, right now, there's no vaccinations available for children under 12. And it's my understanding from being a news junkie that we may not see those until the winter. I don't know for sure, but I do believe, at the end of the first semester, if not sooner, we can monitor and see how things are going and what the current state of affairs in Montgomery County is.
Dr. McKnight, you nodded, but.
Yes, absolutely. I want to say yes. This is our recommendation for the fall for all staff and students in all of our buildings. And this is our recommendation, and we will absolutely revisit it. As of right now, the circumstances say that this is the best decision for where we are right now, given our current circumstance. So we will revisit. We can revisit quarterly. Yes, that is our commitment. I want to thank the board for your endorsement and support of this, because this is about our community together and making the best decision to keep everyone safe.
Ms. Harris.
Yes, thank you. And just building on Ms. O'Neill and Ms. Silvestri's comments, I'm hoping, and it's my understanding, that this is just one piece of the fall public health mitigation measures we're going to be looking at for the full reopening of school for the 2021-22 school year, and that we will hopefully soon have a comprehensive mitigation plan for the school system that covers many contingencies, so that as a system, we are able to adapt to the changing public health recommendations and the changing landscape of COVID in quicker, more nimble ways than perhaps we were able to do last year. Because I think, and I'm looking at Dr. Gales, but I think it's quite possible that we could see, we're all focused right now on the Delta variant, as we should be, but we may see other variants emerge as well, and we need to be ready to act properly to keep staff and students safe, but as quickly and nimbly as we can. And so again, that gets to, this mandatory masking is the first of one piece, but we need that comprehensive plan that allows us to adapt sort of in real time.
Ms. Haluni.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly make a comment before we move on from this item. As Dr. McKnight mentioned, I visited Roscoe Nix Elementary School and Arcola Elementary School with Ms. Harris, and a comment that actually stuck with me that Ms. Harris made while we were there is that it didn't feel like the first day of school. And I think part of that does have to do with the innovative school calendar that those schools run on. But I think another thing is just the amount of time and energy and effort put into making sure that this reopening process was safe. And I know a comment that we often get that I hear a lot from the community is that masking would be a difficult thing to hold young students to, but I certainly didn't see any evidence of that while we visited. Every student seemed very, very comfortable keeping a mask on the entire time, even during gym when they were playing in the basketball courts. So I just want to say that it seemed like a very, very safe and welcoming and exciting environment.
Thank you. And I just want to add my 2 cents worth too. I think that while education is our mission, we have to provide a safe and secure environment for our students and our teachers, because at this point in time, we have no ability to ask about vaccination status. So while it may appear that only our elementary school students and those that are 11 years old and middle school are at risk, we might actually have more people at risk than you think of, because we don't know the status of those persons. At this time, I'm going to take a vote on the motion we have on the floor. All in favor, raise your hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you. I didn't know if Dr. Gales wanted to speak, or Dr. McKnight, what the plan was, or if he was just here for interrogation.
But Dr. Gales does know interrogation very well. I do want to thank Dr. Gales again publicly, because he has been a great partner in this work. And, you know, like we said, the most important work directly in front of us is making sure we have a model of testing that will be one that is of ease to our families as we come into the fall. But I just want to take a moment just to say thank you to him again for being a great partner and working alongside the school system. Dr. Gales, any comments?
Thank you, Dr. McKnight, and thank you to the board. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and answer questions. I'm always thankful for opportunities where there aren't a ton of questions and things move forward smoothly. But know that I and my office are always available to help assist in any of the decision-making processes that you all have in front of you. You all are charged with keeping the kids of our county safe, and you clearly take that job and that role very seriously. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to work closely with Dr. McKnight and her staff. And again, we're happy to assist in whatever way we can moving forward in whatever capacity. I did want to put out there that in the time that you all have been meeting, I believe the CDC will be updating their guidelines, as referenced before, with face covering recommendations for certain areas, but also updating their guidelines related to schools. And from my understanding, they will be updating their guidelines to recommend what you all just passed in your resolution, that all folks in school settings, regardless of their vaccine status, wear face coverings to offer protection for all folks, in particular those, our children who aren't yet eligible for vaccine. So thank you all for the opportunity to work with you all. And if we can be of any assistance, just let us know. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Gales. We're very appreciative of your taking your time to come to the meeting today. And like you, we know that what will come out on Twitter won't be favorable to us, but it's what's needed. And so we thank you. Ms. Mondrowski, and then Ms. O'Neill, you have a comment?
Yep, I just, I had a clarifying question, and you may have said it and I might have missed it, but for the testing, are we looking at doing any kind of rapid testing or anything like that in school? Or is it when you were talking about trying to make sure that we have testing opportunities? I mean, if someone doesn't feel well or something going specifically, not the pool testing type of stuff, I mean, specifically in the health room.
We are not talking about pool testing generally in the way that we did it in the spring. We are nailing down some specifics about where and who would be administering those tests.
I appreciate that. And then I also just want to say that I appreciate the resolution, the flexibility that we will be looking at it, not just quarterly, but as recommendations unfold and as things roll out. So thank you.
Ms. O'Neill.
Yeah, so I did have a question, and it could be a follow-up in August. You know, in the times when people do have to unmask, such as eating lunch, and in the spring, we had everybody facing one direction and not large numbers of kids in the cafeterias. But how will we handle that unmasked time for lunch? And then the other question is, in terms of contact tracing, you know, in the spring, we did not have any volunteers coming into the buildings. What are our thought process about volunteers coming in for purposes of contact tracing?
Yes, thank you, Ms. O'Neill. So I'll start with the latter, and then I will send the other question to the opening of school in terms of cafeteria to the staff in eating lunch. But for our volunteers, we actually are looking to have our volunteers come because many of them are helping to support extracurricular activities. We will be working with them in the organizations that they work with to make sure that they too are a part of all of the safe conditions that we have in place in terms of working with our students and how they support. So that is a part that we are still ironing out details for specifically, but we do know that we are going to be very dependent on volunteers and other just partners who are supporting a lot of our services within the school, but are not a part of our staff. So that's where we are with ironing out specifics in terms of protocols for them to make sure they are aware of exactly what it is that we are expecting and how we will engage with them in the fall. But we will talk more specifically about that because we're going to bring generally extracurriculars back in one of our upcoming board meetings, just so that you'll see some of the things that we're doing in extracurricular areas after COVID-19. So in regards to the lunch guidance, Ms. Dawson.
Yeah, so children have to eat. We all have to eat. So in working with Dr. Gales and considering the guidelines, the biggest thing is to minimize the parameters and the experience of students. So students have been eating currently and they have had their masks, and then they take their mask off and they eat, and then they put their masks back on. So for periods of time, they have to work with it. We've been trying to provide spacing as much as possible. We still do that in the schools, but there's no way around providing them any other way but an opportunity to eat. So some of that also has to do with the amount of students coming down for lunch, as there's different lunch shifts. You know, the whole school isn't in an elementary school eating at once. There's different lunch times. They are coming in and out. And that is something, hand washing is constant, we still provide the hand dial and different kinds of hand sanitizers so that students have that opportunity while they're in the cafeteria and in the classroom still. So you can't get around the fact that we still need to wash our hands, use masks, and distancing when necessary.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments.
Sorry, I just have one kind of follow-up and then, or two little follow-ups. As far as the volunteering aspect goes, are we for allowing people to volunteer, like reading with children and things like that virtually at all, whether it be through the virtual academy or to support some of the students who could use someone to read with them, but maybe aren't there? And I guess kind of along those lines, actually, I can tie it in with my other follow-up question, was about how are we going to, and maybe this is a bigger presentation for the next time in terms of answering it, but how are we going to be setting schools up so that they can address virtual aspects of teaching or learning that doesn't fall necessarily into the virtual academy, if you know what I mean. Like things where if we have somebody who wants to do virtual volunteering for reading, or whether it's a student who's going to be sick for 2 weeks, and that's different than a whole, I mean, that's hard to keep up with outside of school, and how we're going to be set up for those kind of things.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bondrowski. So actually that fits into a lot of MCPS Better Than Ever motto, because there are some things that we've learned that are quite frankly more easily accessible to our students in a virtual environment that, you know, may not require things like transportation and other barriers that sometimes can become barriers for access for our students. And so moving forward, we absolutely are going to continue to capture in what ways and what services can we provide, even in our in-person experiences, that very well may provide, you know, a virtual experience that may be beneficial. Like, for instance, you know, I know Dr. Gales had gone in before and spoken with some of our elementary students, but now him being able to be more accessible to do that and having a conversation virtually does allow us to still be able to leverage that space. And the same thing for many other opportunities that we provide for our students, and not only our students, but our families. We've learned from our schools that in many cases, there are some formats of utilizing a virtual space that have been beneficial to our families and that have eliminated some hardships. You know, some meetings, specifically required meetings that families have to come into in which they have to take time off from work. So we are going to still offer many of those services to our families and to our students, because that is a part of who we are moving forward. And we want to leverage all of those opportunities. So our schools will be a part of helping to build out, you know, what that looks like, and communicating with their families what those processes and procedures will be that will be able to provide not only in person, but a virtual, if that's going to be the opportunity to increase engagement. Absolutely.
Right, I appreciate that. And for the flexibility of going in and out that Mr. DeAndre mentioned, that would be for both going in as well as leaving. In other words, leaving the in-person and going to a virtual academy for a quarter, as well as the other way around, correct? I just wanted to clarify, because you mentioned there was going to be flexibility, but I just want to make sure it's going both directions and not just for kids who said they wanted virtual, but then decide want to come back to the buildings.
So there's some pieces that are still being worked out due to the staffing implications. So that information that I shared previously was shared with families who are applying specifically to go in, knowing that the expectation was a full year commitment, but there were opportunities to transition back to the homeschool. Other pieces are still being worked out.
Okay, I appreciate that. And for the, your recommendations was that at recess, for example, kids do wear masks, but it's recommended, not required, right?
So I will let Dr. Gale say this, but I feel like I've said it enough where I can. If there are opportunities in which distancing is not possible, that is when we require masking. There are some opportunities outside in which, you know, it is a natural part of what the activity that they're doing where distancing is possible, where kids may not have to wear masks. So we don't want to, you know, provide flexibility, you know, or be too stringent when that's not necessary. But this is where there will be a lot of judgment calls in terms of what do these guidances mean in these particular situations when our staff members are working with our students. Dr. Gales, was that accurate?
Yes, so the recommendation, at least from the health perspective, again, consistent with American Academy of Pediatrics and what the CDC will be putting out in the next 20 minutes or so, is universal masking in indoor settings in the school system, regardless of vaccine status.
Thank you. Ms. Harris.
I just wanted to follow up on something that Ms. Dawson was talking about when it was coming to how we'll handle lunches and things like that in with the mask mandates and things like that. I'm wondering, following up threads of multiple prior board meetings when we've talked about more intentional use of outdoor space. So if we're moving into a time where once again going to be mandating masks, but of course during lunch periods, masks can't be worn. And will we be looking at utilizing outdoor space, both because it does help with our indoor air quality. We've been talking for a long time about the need to get students outdoors more intentionally during the school day anyway. And then making it more possible perhaps for students to be a little bit more socially distanced if that becomes part of the public health mitigation strategies that are recommended again.
Ms. Harris, those are practices we will have in place moving forward. It's interesting. We've had a chance to look at some of our practices and think about what applies in better circumstances moving forward. And I'll give you a few examples. For instance, Ms. Dawson mentioned when students are coming down for lunch and the number of students that are coming down for lunch. Well, in some cases, we've reserved some parts of the cafeteria to not be used, thinking that maybe another set of 200 students may be coming in to use that side of the cafeteria. So while group A students are there first, they may be only using one part of the cafeteria. Well, now it makes sense for us to look at that lunch schedule and make adjustments so that we can utilize the entire cafeteria for group A and just change the schedule in which kids are coming in. Same example that you've shared about using outdoor space. Our kids have shown us, in lots of circumstances, they enjoy using their outdoor spaces. And many of our schools have embraced that even more since COVID-19. So we do encourage and want them to continue to use those spaces. Some of them have always and continue to prefer to stay in the classroom and eat their lunches as well, if their teachers are available for that. So moving forward, having all of these different circumstances in place will allow us to be able to provide some greater flexibility in how we utilize our cafeteria space and the number of students that we are accommodating so that we can take all of the things that we're discussing into consideration to keep the environment safe and yet usable for our students and staff.
Thank you. I also wanted to note that you said something that was very interesting, and I hope that it will continue to be used. The flexibility that the virtual world provided for our parents allowed a lot more participation because they didn't have to try to get to a certain venue by a certain time. And so I hope that that will continue and we will see even more increased involvement of our parents in their kids' education because now they can access this through the virtual world. Thank you. So we are now up to item 6. Dr. McKnight, would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Dr. Gales, for joining us. We'll release you at this time unless you want to stay with us for the rest of our board meeting. Thank you. Okay, we will move next to item 6, which is our discussion of our charter school applications. And our previous board meetings, we went through a number of applications, and I'll just start by sharing some of our requirements. So the state law does require that public schools in Maryland does administer a process for applicants who are interested in opening a public charter, submit their proposals, and as they submit their proposals, they're also expected to receive feedback. The application process is accessible to public and technical assistance is offered to all applicants, acknowledging that some of them may be involved in this process for the first time and will need that assistance in maneuvering through the process. Charter school applications must be submitted by the first business day in April, and the board must render a decision on those applications within 120 days of that particular due date of April, the first business day in April. This year, as in previous years, MCPS assembled a panel of internal and external experts composed of representatives from the curriculum, assessment, operations, and finance offices, as well as our parents, our associations, and many other academic design experts so that they would be able to provide their opinion and perspective into this discussion. These panel members have reviewed the applications that have come into MCPS and have interviewed the charter candidates as well. During the June 29th board meeting, staff introduced 2 charter school candidates, the Washington McLaughlin Charter School for Boys and the Washington McLaughlin Charter School for Girls, and the MECCA Business Learning Institute. Staff shared the panel's evaluations of their strengths and noted the specific areas of concern to be considered. During your discussion on June 29th, you had an opportunity to ask further questions, and the staff has conducted additional follow-up to gather information and to provide clarity on areas in which you had specific questions. Today, the board will act on these applications and determine whether or not to permit the schools to operate in Montgomery County. So at this time, I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Nikki Hazel, the Associate Superintendent of Curriculum Instructions, who will review the applications and will lead the discussion. Hazel?
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. Good afternoon, everyone. The first charter school applicant that I will just briefly review is the Washington McLaughlin Charter School for Boys. and the Washington McLaughlin Charter School for Girls. The WMCS Charter School proposes a single gender or single sex school. The applicant indicates in creating single gender schools for a friendly environment for boys and a girl-friendly environment, and believes that that will make students more comfortable and more engaged in learning. The panel noted the following areas of strength, which included that they will follow the MCPS curriculum and procedures and conveyed a passion and demonstrated the importance of relationships with students. However, the panel also noted significant areas of concern. The applicant did not have a clear plan for preparation of the school site, did not know the extent of the repairs needed. The team felt that the applicant did not demonstrate a viable financial plan and did not have startup funds to cover the building repairs. And the revenue that was shared in the application for the charter school only included the projected cost per student, and they did not have additional costs to run the building. So the panel did not recommend that the board grant WMCS a charter for the 2022-2023 school year. So at this time, I will turn it over to President Wolf.
Thank you. I have a question that I think we want to try to understand that Ms. O'Neill had asked before. And this concerns the time frame that we're dealing with for applications. Could you talk a little bit about how the time frame interacts with the MCPS school year for getting special programs, announcements out, things like that?
So the time frame for our special programs, if we have any schools that have, for example, magnet programs or any special programs, usually begins in the fall, in October. That is when we begin to have family meetings, open houses to begin to attract students to those programs. And then going through application process can be around November, December timeframe, with the hopes that after the new year, we would be able to, a February time period, be able to inform families. Ms. Wolf, is that what you're referring to, or were you looking for the timeframe of the application process for charter schools?
No, Dr. McKnight covered the application process. I was trying to understand just what you gave us. Thank you. At this time, we have a board resolution that we're going to read. I'm going to ask Ms. Vestri to read just the resolves.
This is Mecca.
Oh, sorry. Hold up. I have so many pieces here. Actually, I had thought that you all were actually presenting the resolution.
Yes, I was just going, I'm happy to read the resolution.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so, and I will read a couple of the whereas. Whereas applicant seeks to operate 2 separate single-sex schools, one for boys and one for girls, but did not demonstrate a clear understanding of the federal requirement to operate a single-sex school and the ability to comply with such requirements. Therefore, be it resolved that the Montgomery County Board of Education denies in its entirety the application of the Washington McLaughlin Charter School for Boys Incorporated and the Washington McLaughlin Charter School for Girls Incorporated to open a public charter school in Montgomery County.
With approval.
Is there any discussion at this time? All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Dr. McKnight, you want to continue?
Yes, Ms. Hazel, I will turn it back over to you to discuss the second application.
Okay, thank you. The next charter school applicant that I'd like to review for consideration is the Mecca Business Learning Institute, or MBLI. MBLI is designed as a college preparatory and vocational school for middle and high school students with a business learning education theme. MBLI has been constructed based on the Career Academy school model with a business focus. The panel noted the following areas of strength: identified an educational philosophy that includes the instructional methods and strategies for middle schools that will help students build cognitive and problem-solving skills. They identified a facility for the school and presented a property highlights. They were awarded a $1 million startup grant by the Maryland State Department of Education, and have a curriculum that is aligned to the Common Core state standards and highly rated on ed reports. Dr. Marcus, who was here with us during our last meeting, who helped facilitate the process, Mrs. Williams, and I had an opportunity to engage with MBLI leaders with follow-up questions via email and through a meeting. And they affirmed current interest in MBLI programming with 214 additional people that signed the electronic letter of support. Additionally, they shared adjustments to their overall budget to address the gap in the per pupil allotment. During our meeting and follow-up with MBLI, we requested more documentation and proof of revenue to support the funding of the school. Yesterday evening, MBLI did provide a follow-up email with documentation from bank and community partners, yet we have not had the time to go in depth or do an analysis or vetting of the support documents. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. McKnight.
All right, Ms. Wolf, would you like there be any discussion, or would you like me to read the resolution?
I'd like you to read the resolution, please.
All right, thank you. So I will read a couple of the whereases and then the resolve. Whereas Montgomery County Public Schools received a charter school application from MECCA Business Learning Institute for a proposed middle and high school business academy. And whereas MECCA Business Learning Institute indicated that they have banking relationships that can be assessed to address the shortfall in revenue, but did not provide details of such arrangements, including repayment structure, nor provide financial commitment letters. Now therefore be it resolved that the Montgomery County Board of Education denies the application of the MECCA Business Learning Institute to operate a public charter school in Montgomery County, including requested waivers from the Board of Education policies and the Montgomery County Public Schools regulations in the school year 22-23.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Before we take a final vote on this application, I'd like to make a couple of comments. After thoroughly reviewing the charter school application, I was primarily concerned about the stability of the financial funding model set forth. We did receive additional information late last night. This did not allow time for detailed analysis before the vote today. But upon preliminary review, it still does not appear that they will sufficiently close the gap that was in the original recommendation. So I know this has been a very difficult year for all of us. I'm sure the pandemic interrupted some of the momentum and planning that went into the application. But in the end, we were just unable to ascertain, or at least I'm unable to ascertain, how costs beyond those that we are providing money for are really going to be covered. So based on this, I just don't see how it's going to be feasible for them to start up in 2022. Thank you. Ms. Harris, you have comments?
Yes, thank you. Just building a bit on Ms. Wolf's comments. I do want to say, I actually see a lot to like in this proposal. I think it's very interesting concentration on business and finance starting in the 6th grade. It coincidentally builds on some student advocacy that we've been hearing quite a bit of over the past 8 months around the need for better and more comprehensive financial literacy opportunities and educational curricula in MCPS. And, when you think back to the class of 21 that just graduated, they started kindergarten in 2008. This is a group of students who essentially have lived through 2 recessions and the economic impacts, both societal and personal, that means. And I think it sort of, for me, shows the importance of making sure that at the right time and in the right way, we are providing students the resources and tools that they need to understand the concepts of personal and business finance. So I agree very much with Ms. Wolf. We just didn't have the information we needed to fully assess the viability long-term of the funding structure for the school, and certainly didn't have time to evaluate all of the documentation that came in late last night. But that said, I would encourage the group to address the concerns that have been raised through this process and consider coming back with some of the more fully fleshed out details that would be required for the board to really make a thorough evaluation of the application. I particularly appreciated the way in which the programming and the plan was to roll out the school a grade at a time. So start with grade 6, then the next year grade 6 and 7, and the next year grade 6, 7, and 8, which is a process that MCPS does have experience with. That's how we reopened Northwood in the mid 2000s. So I just encourage the group to not abandon the attempt, but to see if the issues that have been identified by my colleagues can be addressed.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper and Ms. Graham, they certainly demonstrated their passion when they came before the board on June 29th, and we encourage them to continue working on their vision. Did I see your light, Ms. Silvestri?
Yes, I fully agree with the resolution and the comments of President Wolf. I did want to point out that an additional concern of mine is that we already have a finance academy at Paint Branch High School, which is in the area where this school would open up. And I know this is a middle school and high school proposal, but it just raises a concern about the school's ability to recruit enough students when they if they were to open up. So in addition to the fundraising concerns, I wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready for the vote?
Yes.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're now up to item 7, which are Board of Education items. Can I get 7.1 moved?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Okay, we have 2 items from the previous board meeting. We have the examination of student achievement data for English speakers of other languages and Latino students. I'm just going to read the resolution again so that we can take a vote on it. Be it resolved that the Board of Education amend examination of student achievement data for English speakers of other languages and Latino students to remove the specified project completion date of March 31st, 2021, and allow respondents to submit proposed project costs.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Ms. Silvestri?
Dr. McKnight, with this new resolution, is there a new target date if we are removing the current target date? When will the work be completed is my concern.
So I think it would be great for us to be flexible on that. I think it will be a big priority of ours for us to be able to come back and be able to really spend some time getting an understanding of how, our students, particularly in this area, have been impacted over the past year. to try and reset the next follow-up action. So if I had to guess, I would say by the end of first semester. But flexibility, given all of the circumstances, is what I would automatically recommend. But in hopes of by the end of first semester, I think is something that could be reasonable. Sure.
We take a vote. All in favor? Go ahead, Miss. You got your. Oh.
Second, sorry.
Okay.
Another one.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. We also have a second resolution to be voted on, and that is for the renaming, a naming correction, I should say, of the Ronald McNair Elementary School. And that is that the Board of Education direct the Superintendent of Schools to correct the name of Ronald McNair Elementary School by amending the school's name to Dr. Ronald E. McNair Elementary School no later than December 2021.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Does anyone have any new business items to bring forward? Seeing none, I think we're ready to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. We are adjourned.